The biting December cold in Chicago made people rush through the streets of our old neighborhood. But nothing compared to the cold that gripped my chest when I heard the words that would destroy 30 years of fatherhood in just a few seconds. Find somewhere else to live, Dad. You have nothing here anymore. Lily's voice echoed through the apartment I had bought, with decades of sweat, working as a welder in the steel mills of Gary. What? The words came from the mouth of the daughter I had raised alone since she was 5 years old, after her mother left her for a younger man with more money. I stood in the living room at 69 years old, holding a small, worn leather suitcase. The same one I used when I traveled for work in the 80s. My hands were calloused from 3 decades of operating welding equipment at the factory. They trembled slightly, not from fear, but from an explosive mix of disappointment and disbelief. Lily, honey, what are you saying? I asked with a broken voice. This house is ours. I bought it for us when you turned 15. Lily rolled her eyes with the contempt that only ungrateful children can show towards parents who sacrificed everything for them. At 39 years old, she was a law school graduate thanks to my money, and married to a lawyer from a big firm downtown. Now she looked at me as if I were a nuisance that needed to be removed. Dad, you are losing it. This house has been in my name for 5 years. You transferred it yourself before the notary. Remember you said it was so I would not have problems when you died. I remembered it was true. In 2019, when I discovered some nodules on my lung that later turned out to be benign, I was afraid of dying and leaving my daughter unprotected. I transferred everything to her name, the house, the car, even the small bank account I had at the time. But honey, that was to protect you. I never thought you would. That you would what, Dad? That I would take care of a grumpy old man forever. You do not contribute anything. You only spend money on medicines. You make noise watching TV at full volume because you refuse to use a hearing aid. And you still complain about my cooking. Tears began to form in my eyes. It was not just Lily's words, but the coldness with which she said them. It was as if the 30 years I woke up at 4:30 in the morning to make her breakfast before school had never existed, as if the sleepless nights when she had pneumonia at 8 years old were just my imagination. Lily, I worked all my life to give you everything. I never remarried so I would not divide my attention. I paid for your degree at State University, your graduation, your wedding at the fancy hotel downtown. And I thank you, Dad, but I have grown up. Chris and I want our privacy. We want to have children, and we cannot be taking care of elderly people at the same time. I noticed she did not say taking care of you or taking care of my dad. She said taking care of elderly people as if I were just anyone from the street. From the master bedroom came the impatient voice of Chris, my son-in-law. Babe, did you talk to him? Yet the movers are arriving in an hour to bring our new furniture from the store. I'm almost done, Chris, Lily shouted back. Then she turned to me. Dad, you need to leave today. I already told you that you were leaving. The truck is coming for your old furniture tomorrow morning. My old furniture. I looked around. The solid wood bookshelf I built myself when Lily was a child. The dining table where we did homework together for years. The armchair where we watched cartoons every Sunday. Dad, those things are very outdated. They do not match our new minimalist decoration. They might serve you wherever you go. To live. The phrase, wherever you go to live, pierced me like a knife. I had nowhere to go. All my friends from the steel mill had already died or moved to Florida. My only relatives were some distant cousins in Ohio I had not seen in decades. Lily, I have nowhere to go. Dad, that is not my problem. You had 68 years to plan. I cannot carry your responsibilities forever. How many times can a man feel his heart break before it stops beating completely? I discovered that the number was much higher than I imagined. Each word from my daughter was one more fragment. I remembered when she was 7 and told me she wanted to marry me when she grew up, because I was the best dad in the world. I remembered the times she ran to my arms when I came home from work, sticky with glue from school, shouting "Daddy" with eyes shining with pure joy. Where had that little girl gone? "It is okay, honey," I said, feeling something harden in my chest, a door closing forever. "I'm leaving." "Perfect. Leave the keys on the table by the entrance." I went up to the room that had been mine for 15 years and took only the essentials. Some closed documents, a photo of Lily as a little girl at her communion, the only one she had not taken down from the walls when she redecorated everything in modern style. In the back of the dresser drawer, my fingers found something I had not touched in years, an old bank card, blue and faded with peeling edges. It was from the community bank from the time they still used those thick magnetic cards. I did not even remember what account that was. It must have been from the time I worked at a different company in the 90s. It probably had a few forgotten dollars, if it even still worked. I put the card in my shirt pocket, more out of nostalgia than hope. I went down the stairs with the suitcase in my hand. Lily was in the kitchen with her back turned, talking on the phone with someone about furniture and minimalist decoration. She did not even turn around to say goodbye. I left the keys on the table by the entrance as a final act of obedience to a daughter who did not deserve my submission. I opened the door of the house where I had been happy for so long and stepped onto the sidewalk. The December cold chilled my bones, but I felt cold from the inside, from the place where a father's love used to exist that now seemed to have been just my foolishness. I walked to the bus stop holding the suitcase that contained everything that remained of a lifetime of work and dedication. Some people passed by me without looking. To the world, I was just another old man on the street. To myself, for the first time in 68 years, I did not know who I was. And you who are listening to me, have you ever gone through something like this? Have you ever felt betrayed by the person you love the most? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened after that afternoon changed everything. Subscribe to the channel, William's Revenge Stories, so you do not miss the next stories of paternal triumph. Before continuing, if you like real stories like this that show it is never too late for a man to recover his dignity, subscribe to the channel. Here, I do not tell stories of victims. I tell stories of fathers who decided to fight back. My name is Robert Miller, and I need to go back a little in time so you understand how I reached that point, being thrown out of my own house by the daughter I raised alone, as if I were dead weight and not a father who dedicated 3 decades of his life to give her everything I never had. I was born in 1955 in a poor family in Ohio. My father was a farmhand, and my mother washed other people's clothes. I was the first in the family to finish high school, and at 18 I moved to Chicago with a simple dream, to have a better life. I got a job at a factory in Gary operating machines that turned steel into parts for the automotive industry. The work was heavy and dangerous, but honest. I woke up every day at 4:30, took 2 buses to get to the factory at 6, and worked until 5. Many times I worked overtime until 8 to earn extra money. At 25, I knew Martha at a dance at the Union Hall. She was pretty and cheerful. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store. We got married in 1982 in a simple party at the parish hall. I was radiant. Finally, I had a family. Lily was born in 1985, and I melted completely. She was a little doll with her mother's cheeks and the green eyes she inherited from me. I spent hours watching her in the crib, planning the future I would give that girl. She would be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever she wanted to be. She would never go through hardships like I did. Martha, however, did not adapt well to motherhood. She complained that her life was over, that she was trapped at home, that I did not earn enough money to give her what she deserved. When Lily was 5 years old, Martha met Anthony, an older merchant who had a clothing store downtown. "Robert, it is not working anymore," she told me one afternoon in March of 1990. "You are a good man, but I want more from life. Anthony is going to give me a bigger house trips, things you will never be able to give me. And Lily, I asked, incredulous. She stays with you. You are a better father than I am a mother. I was devastated, but also determined. If Martha did not want to be a mother, I would be father and mother. I asked for permission at work to organize myself. I found a neighbor to take care of Lily when I was working and completely restructured my life. I woke up at 4 to make breakfast for my girl, get her ready for school, and drop her off at Mrs. Karen's house before going to work. At night, I picked Lily up, made dinner, helped her with homework, gave her a bath, and told her stories before sleeping. Weekends were just for us. The park, the zoo, the amusement park, when I had extra money. I gave up everything for Lily. I never had a serious girlfriend again. I rejected marriage proposals from good women because I was afraid a stepmother might mistreat my girl. I worked double shifts to pay for private school English classes, swimming, ballet, everything she wanted. When Lily turned 15, I used all my savings as a down payment for a house in the neighborhood. It was not a mansion, but it was ours. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a garage. I renovated everything alone on weekends. I painted built bookshelves, made a little garden. "Daddy, our house is the prettiest on the block," Lily said back then, hugging me tightly. In her teenage years, Lily was a sweet girl. She got good grades, helped at home, and was affectionate with me. I felt like the most accomplished man in the world. All the sacrifices were worth it when she said, "I love you, Daddy," before sleeping. I paid for her law degree at State University, working 2 jobs. Besides the factory, I did carpentry work on weekends. My hands were permanently stained with oil and paint, but Lily's degree shone on the living room wall like a trophy of my victory as a father. When she graduated in 2007, I cried with pride at the ceremony. Seeing that girl I raised alone in a cap and gown giving the speech as valedictorian was the happiest moment of my life. "Daddy, everything I am today I owe to you," Lily said that day, hugging me in front of all her classmates. Lily got an internship at a big firm and was soon hired. She met Chris, too, a lawyer from an upper-middle-class family. The courtship was fast, and the wedding in 2010 was a big party that I paid for using my savings and a loan that took me 3 years to pay off. After the wedding, things began to change. Lily became more distant and critical. She complained about my humble house, the food I made my old-fashioned way of dressing. Chris was never rude, but I felt my son-in-law looked at me with a certain superiority, as if tolerating a poor relative. "Dad needs to modernize," Lily would tell me. "Buy better clothes, get dental treatment, change that haircut." I tried, but it was never enough. No matter how hard I tried, I felt I was constantly being judged. Even so, I continued helping financially. I paid part of Lily's new car. I helped with the remodeling of the young couple's apartment. I was always available when they needed something. In 2019, when I had that health scare, I decided to get everything organized. I transferred the house to Lily's name. I made a will leaving her my few savings. I organized all the documents. I wanted to be sure my daughter was protected if something happened to me. "Dad is not going to die so soon," Lily laughed back then. "But it is good to have everything organized." I recovered completely, but never reversed the transfers. I trusted my daughter completely. She was my blood. My little girl, the person for whom I had lived for 30 years. How could I imagine that the girl I rocked when she had nightmares would one day kick me out of the house as if I were a stranger? How can a father prepare for the moment he discovers that the love he dedicated his entire life to cultivate simply does not exist anymore? There is a specific loneliness for a man who raised a daughter alone, and then she became a stranger. It is the loneliness of someone who gave everything and was left with nothing. The signs had started subtly after Lily's wedding, but like most fathers, I preferred to interpret them as an adjustment phase. After all, it was natural for a newlywed daughter to want her independence, right? The first sign was the change in tone of voice. Lily, who always addressed me with affection, began to speak with a slightly impatient tone, as if conversations with her dad were a boring obligation to fulfill quickly. "Dad, I cannot talk. Right now, I am busy, became the typical answer when I called to see how she was. Calls that used to be daily and lasted half an hour were reduced to weekly contacts of 5 minutes. I attributed this to the fact that she was building her new life. It is normal, I told myself. She is happy and busy. That is what matters. The second sign was the disdain for the family traditions we had built together. Every Sunday since Lily was little, we ate together. I cooked what she liked most: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie. It was the moment of the week I waited for most. Dad, today we cannot. We have a commitment at Chris's family's house. Began to be the recurring excuse. One Sunday became two. Two became a month. A month became occasional. Traditions that took decades to build unraveled in a matter of months. When I tried to express how much I missed them, Lily rolled her eyes. Dad, do not be dramatic. I have my life now. You should also look for something to do. The third sign was shame. I began to realize that Lily felt embarrassed by me when we were in public. At a birthday party for a colleague of hers, I noticed how she dodged when someone asked about family. My dad is retired, she said, omitting that I had worked 35 years as a welder to pay for her studies. Retired sounded better than welder, less blue-collar. I pretended I did not notice, but it hurt. It hurt because I was proud of the work I'd done. I was proud of the machines I operated, of the parts I helped manufacture, of the honest sweat that paid for every expense of Lily's. But for her, apparently, it was a reason for shame. The fourth sign was financial exploitation disguised as family help. Although she was already married and established professionally, Lily kept asking me for money. At first, it was specific things. Dad, can you lend me $1,000? Chris is waiting for a payment that got delayed. I always gave. I never asked when she was going to pay me back because I understood that children do not pay back loans to their dad. Children receive help. But the requests increased in frequency and amount. Dad, I need $5,000 to furnish the new office. Dad, can you help me with $3,000? The car needed expensive maintenance. Dad, $8,000 for a work trip that is going to yield a lot in the future. I took from my small savings, moved money from my pension, sometimes even borrowed to help my daughter. I never questioned. A father who loves does not charge his child, I thought. What I did not know is that there was no late payment, no urgent furniture, no work trip. Chris and Lily had simply gotten used to using Dad as a financial reserve whenever they wanted something extra. A more expensive restaurant a weekend at the Lake Designer Close. It is my dad's money. He has the obligation to help, Lily told Chris. He has nothing else in life besides me. The fifth sign was the explicit lack of respect for my opinions and feelings. I had become a kind of decorative figure in my daughter's life. I was there. I was tolerated, but my words had no weight. When I tried to give advice based on my life experience, Lily sighed heavily. Dad, the world changed. You do not understand how things work now. When I expressed that I missed spending more time together, she responded with irritation. Dad, I cannot be your only source of entertainment. Find a hobby. Do some activity. When I commented that I missed the conversations we had before, she was direct. We do not have so many things in common anymore, Dad. It is natural. I swallowed every slight, every indifference, every moment I felt like a nuisance. I justified it all because it was my paternal love, speaking louder than my self-respect. She is stressed with work. She is adapting to marriage. It will get better. There are pains a man swallows for years until one day the throat simply cannot take it anymore. The sixth sign was emotional manipulation. Whenever I showed any questioning about Lily's behavior, she used the same strategy. Play the victim and turn the game around. Dad, I work too much. I am always tired, and I still have to put up with you demanding attention. It is not fair. Dad, you're being selfish. I have the right to have my own life. Dad, if you keep this up, I'm going to move away permanently. Is that what you want? I always backed down. I apologized for feelings that were legitimate, for emotional needs that were normal. I accepted the blame for things that were not my fault. The seventh sign was systematic exclusion. Lily stopped inviting me to important events in her life. The promotion at the firm was celebrated at a party I was not invited to. Her wedding anniversary was celebrated on a trip I was not informed about. Chris's professional achievements were reason for dinner with Chris's family. "It was something small, Dad. I did not want to bother you," was always the justification. I began to realize I was becoming increasingly peripheral in the life of the person who was the center of my life. But I still could not name what was happening. I still believed it was a phase of misunderstanding, something that would be resolved with patience and understanding. The eighth and final sign was complete dehumanization. Lily stopped treating me like a dad and started treating me like a problem to manage. My emotional needs became excessive neediness. My desire to participate in her life became invasion of privacy. My paternal love became sickly attachment. "Dad, you need to understand that our relationship cannot be like when I was a child. Now I am an adult." I tried to adapt to this new dynamic, but it was impossible. How does a dad stop being a dad? How does someone who loved unconditionally for 30 years learn to love with conditions? The house that used to be the home for both of us became Lily's territory where I was only tolerated. Meals together disappeared. Conversations were reduced to practical matters. Physical affection, like hugs and kisses on the forehead, went extinct. I was becoming a stranger in my own house, an unwanted guest in my own daughter's life. And even so, I could not accept that all was lost. I kept hoping the affectionate Lily from before would return. I kept believing the paternal love I cultivated for decades could not simply have died. How could I imagine that the signs were not just a difficult phase, but the conscious preparation for the moment in 2024 that she would finally get rid of me completely? The same man who carried his daughter on his shoulders one day was left without a floor to stand on. The true nature of the exploitation I suffered only became clear when years later I accidentally found the WhatsApp conversations Lily and Chris exchanged about me. But in that period between 2020 and 2024, I lived in complete denial of what was happening. The system was simple and cruel. Lily had discovered she could use paternal love as a tool for financial and emotional extraction without giving anything in return. Like most men of my generation, I could not see the manipulation because I had been raised to believe fathers exist to give, not to receive. "Dad, I am in a difficult situation at the firm. I need to buy new clothes to impress an important client. Can you help me with $1,000? I did not hesitate. I moved money from my savings. I tightened the budget for the month. But I gave. Lily took the money and spent it on a weekend trip with Chris. When I asked about the client, she changed the subject. "Dad, Chris's car broke down and he needs to work. Can you lend us $2,000 for the repair?" I took out a loan at the bank, paying high interest to help. Chris's car was not broken. They wanted money to furnish the new apartment they had rented without telling me. "Dad, we are thinking about having a child, and we want to buy a bigger apartment. Can you help us with the down payment?" "It is an investment for your future grandchild." I was so moved by the prospect of being a grandfather that I liquidated my retirement fund and gave them $50,000 for the future grandchild. Lily and Chris used the money for a month-long trip to Europe. There were never real plans to have children. The pattern repeated monthly. There was always an emergency, an investment, an opportunity that justified me opening my wallet. And I always opened it because I believed I was investing in my daughter's future, that I was being the father I promised to be when Martha abandoned us. What I did not understand was that every yes I gave strengthened Lily's perception that I existed to serve her. Every sacrifice I made was interpreted by her not as love, but as obligation. In her head, I owed her all that for having complicated her life with my presence. "My dad has to help," Lily told her friends. He never remarried. He has no other expenses. His money is for me. Chris, initially uncomfortable with the exploitation, soon got used to it. Your dad has a good pension. He does not have big expenses anymore, and you guys have a special relationship. It is natural he wants to help. The exploitation was not just financial. Lily also used me as an emotional babysitter, dumping on me all the frustrations and problems she did not want to share with important people in her life. When she fought with Chris, she called me crying. Dad, I think my marriage is ending. I do not know what to do. I dropped everything to console her. I gave advice. I offered support. The next day, Lily was posting happy photos with Chris on Facebook, and I realized they had used me only as an ear for temporary venting. When she had problems at work, I became the unpaid consultant. Dad, I need your opinion on a strategy. I spent hours on the phone helping to think of solutions. When Lily solved the problem using my ideas, she never mentioned my contribution to anyone. When she wanted validation for questionable decisions, I was called. Dad, what do you think if I leave this job to open my own firm? I gave support. I encouraged. I even offered to help financially. When Lily decided not to leave the job, I discovered the consultation had been only, so she felt backed in a decision she had already made. The specific difficulty for men of my generation is that we were raised in a time when dads could not show vulnerability. I swallowed all the humiliations, all the exploitations, all the indifference because real men endure quietly. I never told anyone what I was feeling. I never sought psychological help. I never opened up with a friend. I never admitted to myself that I was being emotionally abused by my own daughter. For my generation, that would be admitting weakness, admitting failure as a father. The few friends I still had from the factory days were dying or moving away. I isolated myself more and more, depending increasingly on my daughter for any kind of affectionate contact. And Lily knew that and used it against me. Dad, if you keep pressuring me, I will have to distance myself. Is that what you want, to be left alone? The threat of abandonment was the ultimate weapon. I was so afraid of losing my daughter that I accepted anything to maintain the connection. I accepted crumbs of affection. I accepted being treated like a human ATM. I accepted being systematically disrespected. My body began to reflect the psychological abuse. I developed nervous gastritis from swallowing so much anger. I started having insomnia, waking up at 3 in the morning, thinking if I had done something to deserve the treatment I received. I developed a silent depression. That type of sadness older men carry without naming. My hair turned completely white in 2 years. My hands developed a slight tremor from anxiety. I started losing weight because I did not feel like cooking just for myself, especially after Lily criticized my food as too greasy and unsophisticated. The worst of all was that I had internalized Lily's narrative. I started to believe I really was a burden, that I really was being too dramatic, that I really needed to give my daughter space. Maybe she is right, I thought in the sleepless nights. Maybe I am too possessive. Maybe I am being selfish, wanting her attention. This self-deception is common in victims of emotional abuse, especially older men who are conditioned not to question the authority of adult children. I was being systematically convinced that my feelings were inadequate, my expectations unreal, my needs excessive. Lily's strategy was perfect. The more she criticized and isolated me, the more desperate I became to win back her love. The more needy I became, the more she used that neediness as justification to treat me poorly. It was a cruel and efficient cycle. Dad is very clingy, that annoys me. Instead of questioning why a daughter gets annoyed with her dad's affection, I blamed myself for being clingy and withdrew even more. During the years 2020 to 2024, I lived in systematic loneliness. I woke up alone, ate breakfast alone, watched TV alone, went to sleep alone. My only significant social interactions were Lily's bi-weekly calls, asking for money or venting problems. I tried other activities. I frequented a senior group at church, but felt out of place because all the other men talked about grandchildren. Trips they took with families, Sunday meals. I did not have that. I only had a daughter who treated me like a bank account. I tried to make new friends, but at 65 plus, making true friendships is hard. People my age are busy with their own families or their own health problems. Younger people have no interest in friendship with a retired man. The loneliness specific to older men abandoned by children is different from any other loneliness. It is the loneliness of someone who invested everything in a single person and discovered it was a bad investment. In 2023, I had an anxiety crisis that took me to the hospital. I called Lily from the ER. Daughter I am at the general hospital. I had a heart problem, I think. Dad, I am in an important meeting. Was it serious? No. Then I will finish here and we will talk later. I spent 6 hours alone in the hospital, discovering I did not have a heart problem, just panic syndrome. When I finally spoke to Lily 12 hours later, she said, "Good thing it was nothing serious, Dad. Next time try to call me only if it is really urgent." Really urgent. I had called my daughter because I thought I was dying, and she thought it was not really urgent. It was at that moment that something inside me began to crack. Not break completely, but crack. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to question if I was being treated well, but I still could not name what was happening. I still believed if I were a better father, more present, more useful, Lily would love me again like before. In early 2024, I made a decision I thought would solve everything. I signed additional documents confirming that all assets transferred in 2019 would remain permanently in Lily's name, waiving any future right of reversion. I thought this definitive gesture of love and trust would show her how much I loved her, how much I trusted her. "Dad, thank you very much," Lily said when she received the documents. "Now I can rest easy about the future." I hoped after that she would become more affectionate, more present. After all, I had given her everything I had. It was the definitive proof of paternal love. What I did not realize was that I had just signed my own eviction order. Sometimes after bridges are burned, they do not need to be rebuilt, even if you helped build them. The December morning I was kicked out of the house passed slowly, as if time conspired for me to feel every second of humiliation. I walked through the streets of the neighborhood carrying my old suitcase, without destination, without plan, without hope. Around 2 in the afternoon, the cold became unbearable, and I took refuge in a small plaza near the subway station. I sat on a bench in the shade of a tree and tried to process what had happened. For the first time in 68 years of life, I did not know what to do. I took out of my pocket the few documents I had managed to take: ID, Social Security card, insurance card, and that faded blue card I had found in the drawer. I looked at the old community bank card. The edges were peeling. The name almost erased, but still readable. Robert Miller. What era was this from? I tried to remember. It must be from the 90s when I worked for a few months at a subcontractor company before returning to the main factory. Back then, the company forced employees to open an account at that bank to receive their paycheck. Probably it had nothing in the account. Maybe a few forgotten dollars, if it even still existed. But I had no other options. My current cards were all in my name, with Lily as beneficiary, and she probably had already canceled everything. Around 3:30, I walked to the nearest community bank branch. The building was modern, with cold air conditioning and organized lines. I felt out of place there with my simple clothes and old suitcase. I took a number and waited. When they called me, I went to the window where a young girl attended me with professional but distant politeness. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "Good afternoon, miss. I wanted to check the balance of a very old account. I have this card here, but I do not remember the PIN." I extended the faded blue card. The employee took it, looked at it with curiosity, and typed something on the computer. "Mr. Robert Miller?" she confirmed, looking at the document. "That is right. I'm going to check in the system." How strange. I felt my stomach tighten. Any problem? Nothing appears in the current system, sir. It might be that this account is very old. I am going to try in the legacy system. She typed a few commands. I'm going to call my supervisor, please. A middle-aged man approached, looked at the screen, frowned, and typed something. Then he looked at me from top to bottom, as if re-evaluating who that simple man in front of him was. Mr. Miller, I am going to need to transfer you to the manager. Please follow me. I was led to a small room with stronger air conditioning, a glass table, and leather armchairs. The manager was a well-dressed man of about 45, who stood up to greet me with more respect than I expected. Mr. Robert Miller, my name is Maurice. I am the manager of this branch. Please take a seat. I settled into the armchair, trying to understand why they were treating me with such solemnity for an account that probably had $500. Maurice typed something on the computer, looked at the screen, typed again, looked again. His face gradually changed, passing from professional curiosity to something close to astonishment. Mr. Miller, Maurice said with a lower voice, do you have knowledge of the history of this account? No, truthfully, it is very old. I think I never used it. I just wanted to see if it still had something. Maurice clicked through more screens. His expression changed completely. He looked at me, then the screen, then at me again. Sir, he said with a trembling voice, do you know how much money is here? I felt something strange in the air. The question was asked in a tone that was not normal for speaking of small amounts. I have no idea. It must be a little right. A few $100s, maybe? Maurice turned the monitor toward me. When I saw the numbers on the screen, my hands trembled. They did not tremble from anxiety or fear as they had been trembling in recent years. They trembled from pure shock. $1,547,356.70. I blinked several times, thinking I was seeing wrong. I looked again. The number was still there. That is that $1.5 million, I whispered. Yes, sir. $1,547,356.70. Maurice confirmed. And from the movement I am seeing here, this value has been growing automatically for decades. I stayed silent for a long time looking at the screen. Maurice respected the silence. How is it possible? I asked finally. From what I am seeing in the history, Maurice explained, consulting several screens. This account was opened in 1994 with an initial deposit of $5,000. From there, monthly automatic deposits of $200 were made from 1994 to 1998. After that, only compound interest for 26 years. I tried to process the information. 1994, 1998. I remembered. It was the period I worked at that subcontractor company that provided services for the oil industry. They paid better than the steel mill, and I worked a lot of overtime. Back then, Lily was about 10 years old, and I wanted to save money for her future. I had completely forgotten, I murmured. They were automatic deductions from my paycheck, I remember now. It was a kind of forced savings the company offered. And apparently, continued Maurice, you never touched the account again. With compound interest and some conservative automatic investments, the bank made over the years the money multiplied. I looked at the screen again. Almost $1.5 million. I, who 4 hours ago had been kicked out of my house by my daughter for being a burden, was looking at a fortune I did not even know I had. Mr. Miller, said Maurice gently, would you like to make any movement transfer to an active checking account? I did not answer immediately. A strange sensation was taking over me. It was not joy. It was not relief. It was something colder, more controlled. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I felt free to think without the fog of emotional dependence. I no longer needed to swallow humiliations in exchange for crumbs of affection. I no longer needed to accept being treated like a bank account by a daughter who had just kicked me out of my house. I had power now, real, concrete financial power. "Maurice," I said, with a voice that surprised me myself with its firmness, "I need to open a new checking account, completely new, and I'm going to need some special services." "Of course, Mr. Miller. What kind of services?" I thought for a moment. For 30 years I had been just a dad, a provider, a man whose identity was completely defined by his relationship with Lily. Now, for the first time since 1990, I was Robert Miller, just Robert Miller, and Robert Miller had $1.5 million. First, I want to transfer all that money to a new account that only I have access to. Second, I want it to be all absolutely confidential. Third, I am going to need recommendations for a good lawyer specialized in family law. Maurice nodded positively to each request. "And lastly," I said with a coldness I did not know I possessed, "I am going to need to hire a private investigator." 2 weeks passed since I disappeared from Lily's life. For her, the first days were of pure relief. Finally, she had the house just for her and Chris. Finally, she could redecorate without hearing complaints about waste of money. Finally, she could live without the heavy energy of Dad circling the house. "Babe, I cannot believe I waited so long to do this," she told Chris the first night, hugging him on the new sofa they had bought. "I should have made this decision years ago." Chris, although he agreed they needed privacy, felt slightly uncomfortable with the coldness with which Lily had kicked me out, but he said nothing. Their relationship had improved significantly without my presence. In the first days, Lily busied herself selling my old furniture and buying new pieces. Each piece of furniture that went was like erasing one more trace of her father from her new life. "Look how modern the living room looks without that horrible bookshelf he made," she showed friends who came to visit. "Now it looks like a civilized person's house." But at the end of the second week, Lily started to feel something strange. It was not nostalgia, exactly. It was more like a financial void. She was used to being able to count on Dad's loans whenever she needed extra money. Suddenly, that source had dried up. "Chris, we need to remodel the bathroom. It is very outdated," she commented one afternoon. "How much does it cost?" he asked. "About $5,000. It is nothing out of this world." "Lily, our budget is tight this month. Maybe next year." "Next year?" Lily frowned. She was not used to hearing no for expenses. Dad had always been there to cover the extras. It was then she realized. Having kicked Dad out also meant having lost the paternal bank. At first she thought it would be temporary. Dad always came back after fights. He always apologized. He always submitted. But this time was different. I did not call. I did not send a message. I did not appear at the door asking for forgiveness. It was as if I had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. In the third week, Lily started to worry. Not out of affection, she had developed the impressive capacity to disconnect filial feelings, but for practical reasons. What if I had died? What if I was in need? What if someone discovered she had kicked her dad out of the house? "Chris, maybe we should look for my dad," she suggested one night. "I thought you did not want more contact with him." "I do not want him living here, but I also do not want him to die on the street. It would be terrible for our reputation if someone found out." Chris agreed it would be better to know where I was, even if only to be sure I would not come back to bother them. Lily called my cell phone. Number disconnected. She tried the landline I used at the house. Also disconnected. She tried to make contact through some old acquaintances from the factory. No one knew about me for weeks. "Strange," murmured Lily. "Where does a 68-year-old man disappear to?" In the fourth week, she started to get really annoyed. Not out of filial love, but because the situation was getting out of her control. Lily always had total control over me. She knew exactly where I was, what I did, how much money I had. Now suddenly I had disappeared completely. Worse. Rumors began to circulate among the neighbors. Mrs. Mary, who lived in the house next door for 20 years, had asked, "Lily, where is your dad? I haven't seen him in the yard for a while." "Oh, he went to visit some relatives in Ohio. Lily lied, but the question bothered her. If the neighbors started asking too much, it could become a social problem for her. In the 5th week, Lily decided to look for me actively. First, she went to the clinic where I had regular appointments. The secretaries informed her I had canceled all future appointments. Strange. I was a hypochondriac. I would never miss medical appointments. Then she went to the bank where I received my pension. The manager, respecting banking secrecy, only said that Mr. Miller is fine and attending to his affairs normally. Even stranger. If I was attending affairs normally, it meant I was not in need. Where the hell was I living? It was then Lily made a decision that would change everything. She hired a private investigator to find me. What she did not imagine is that I had made exactly the same decision, hiring a private investigator to investigate her. In the 6th week after the eviction, Lily received a call she did not expect. "Hello, Lily Miller." "Yes, who is speaking?" "This is Henry Davis, attorney at law. I represent Robert Miller. I would like to schedule a meeting with you, ma'am." Lily's heart raced. Dad with a lawyer. That made no sense. Dad never had money for a lawyer. Meeting for what? To discuss family and asset matters of mutual interest. It could be today in the afternoon at my office. What asset matters? My dad has no assets. Mrs. Lilly, it would be better if we talked in person. My office is downtown. Can I send you the address? Lily hung up the phone, disturbed. Downtown was an expensive area. Expensive offices. How had I hired a downtown lawyer? She arrived at Henry's office at 4 in the afternoon, accompanied by Chris. The building was glass and steel, modern, with a marble lobby, definitely expensive. Henry received them in an elegant conference room. He was a man of about 50. Impeccable suit. Expensive leather briefcase on the table. "Please take a seat," he said with professional but cold courtesy. "Attorney," started Lily, "I do not understand what is happening. How did my dad hire a lawyer? He does not have money for this." Henry smiled slightly. "Mrs. Lilly, that is exactly the question we need to discuss." He opened the briefcase and took out some documents. "My client, Mr. Robert Miller, hired me to inform you about some important discoveries he made recently." "What discoveries?" "First, Mr. Miller discovered he possesses significant financial resources he had completely forgotten about." Lily and Chris looked at each other. "What resources?" "An old bank account with approximately $1.5 million. Lily's jaw literally dropped. Chris turned pale. That is impossible," she stammered. "My dad is a welder. Retired. He does not have $1.5 million. "Yes, he does, ma'am. And second," continued Henry relentlessly, "my client also discovered interesting information about you." He took out of the briefcase a series of photographs and bank statements. "These are photos of you and Mr. Chris in expensive establishments in the last 5 years. Restaurants, trips, hotels, and these are your bank statements from the same period." Henry spread the documents on the table. "What our detective discovered is that your declared income as a junior lawyer would not be enough to afford this lifestyle." Lily looked at the photos, horrified. There were photos of her and Chris in Paris, in Cancun, in very expensive restaurants in Chicago, photos she herself had uploaded to Instagram, but now organized chronologically as evidence. "Attorney, I do not understand where you want to go with this. I want to get to the fact that my client funded this lifestyle of yours for years without knowing his real financial situation. In other words, you extracted approximately $80,000 from my client over the last 5 years, using false information about emergencies and needs." Chris tried to intervene. "Attorney, that is normal among family. Not when it is based on lies, Mr. Chris. We have here—" Henry took out more papers, the WhatsApp conversations between you two, planning how to extract money from Mr. Miller. Lily turned white. "How did you get our conversations?" "Mr. Miller had access to the backup of your WhatsApp, since for years you shared the same cloud account to save money. He just did not know he could access it. Now he knows. Henry read some conversations. I'm going to invent that the car broke down and ask the old man for 2,000. Lily Miller, March 15th, 2023. Your dad is very naive. If he knows he has money saved, why doesn't he say Chris Mendez, July 20th, 2023? Better this way. As long as he thinks he is broke, he keeps giving me everything I ask for. Lily Miller, July 20th, 2023. The silence in the room was deafening. Lily was going through all the stages of exposure. Denial, anger, bargaining. Okay, attorney. My dad discovered he has money and discovered I lied sometimes. So what does he want? Henry smiled coldly. My client wants two very simple things, Mrs. Lilly. First, that you return the $80,000 you extracted from him through fraud in the last 5 years. I do not have $80,000. Second, that you return the house he transferred to your name in 2019 and 2024. The house is mine. The house was transferred under emotional coercion and through false information about my client's financial condition. It constitutes fraudulent asset transfer. Chris tried to stand up, but Henry stopped him with a gesture. Sit down. I am not done yet. He took out of the briefcase a final document. This is the report from the private investigator my client hired. Besides the financial frauds, we discovered something interesting about Mr. Chris. Chris turned even paler. The gentleman has a girlfriend named Amanda, 28 years old, whom he meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays at a hotel downtown. They are even planning to move in together to an apartment in the Gold Coast. Lily turned to Chris with wide eyes. What? Babe, I can explain. So, continued Henry relentlessly, summarizing Mrs. Lilly, you defrauded your own father for years. You kicked him out of the house based on a false narrative about his financial burden. And now you discover you are married to a man who for 2 years has had another parallel family, funded partially with the money you stole from your father. Lily was in complete shock. Everything her life was based on in the last years had crumbled in 30 minutes. What? What does my dad want from me? She whispered. Henry closed the briefcase. My client does not want anything from you anymore, Lily. He already had a daughter. Now he wants justice. 6 months after the meeting in Henry's office, I was unrecognizable. Not only physically, although I had lost 30 pounds and grown a well-groomed gray beard and adopted a completely new wardrobe. The most impressive transformation was internal. I woke up every day at 6:30 in my new apartment in a nice, quiet suburb, a place I chose strategically to be far from anywhere Lily could find me by chance. It was not an ostentatious apartment. I had learned at 68 years old that real wealth does not need to be exhibited. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a discreet view of the park, simple but quality furniture. For the first time in decades, I had furnished a space, thinking only of my own comfort and taste, without considering anyone else's opinion. My morning routine had become sacred. Black coffee, reading the news on the tablet, I learned to use half an hour of light exercises, recommended by the personal trainer I had hired. At 68 years old, I was discovering the pleasure of taking care of my own body without having to justify myself to anyone about unnecessary expenses on vanity. Henry had become more than a lawyer. He was a friend. It was he who introduced me to the world I never knew existed, the world of mature and successful men who had rebuilt their lives after family betrayals. Robert, you need to meet the people at the club, Henry said one afternoon. They are men who went through similar situations. It will do you good to have a new social network. The club was an informal group that met on Thursdays at a discreet restaurant downtown. 10 men between 50 and 75 years old, all with stories of restarting after traumatic divorces, ungrateful children, or family betrayals. I arrived at the first meeting, nervous thinking I would have nothing in common with those men. I was wrong. My son, said Frank, a former executive of 65, sued me trying to anticipate the inheritance when he discovered I had a company. He alleged I was incapable of managing my own assets. My daughter, said John, a retired doctor, convinced me to transfer my clinic to her name to avoid taxes. Then she kicked me out of the very clinic I built in 30 years of work. I realized I was not alone. There were other men who had gone through similar betrayals and not only survived, but prospered. More importantly, there were men who understood the specific pain of being betrayed by one's own blood. The difference John explained in a private conversation, is that you discovered the betrayal while still having health and resources to do something about it. Many discover it too late. Months passed, and I developed a confidence I never had. For the first time in adulthood, I was not Lily's dad or Martha's ex-husband. I was Robert Miller, period. And Robert Miller was an interesting man. I signed up for an art history course at the museum. I always liked museums, but never had time or money to go deep. Now I had both. I discovered I had my own opinions about art, specific tastes, intellectual curiosity that had been stifled for decades of financial survival. "You have a very sharp eye for colonial art," the teacher commented after a class. "Have you thought about taking a trip to Philadelphia to see the works in person?" I'd never thought about traveling alone. For 30 years, any extra money was for Lily. Now, the idea of a cultural trip to Philadelphia was not only possible, but attractive. I spent a week in Philadelphia alone, visiting historic churches, photographing architectural details, talking to tour guides who were impressed with my knowledge. For the first time in decades, I had time and mental space to simply contemplate beauty without thinking about obligations or responsibilities to other people. On the trip, I met Helen, a retired teacher of 62, also passionate about history. We walked together through the cobblestone streets, comparing impressions on sculptures, debating historical periods. "You have a very interesting perspective on history," Helen said during coffee at a local cafe. "It is refreshing to talk to someone who really understands." I was surprised by the comment. It had been so long since someone valued my opinion on something. For years, Lily had treated any knowledge of mine as outdated or irrelevant. "Thank you, Helen. It is good to be able to talk about these things with someone who appreciates them." We exchanged numbers and kept in touch. It was not romance. Not yet. But it was a genuine friendship based on common interests and mutual respect. For me, that was an extraordinary novelty. Back in Chicago, I immersed myself in other personal projects I had postponed for decades. I started learning Italian, a language I always wanted to master. I hired a private tutor and discovered I had a knack for languages. "Signore Roberto, your pronunciation is very good," the teacher praised. "Have you thought about visiting Italy?" I had thought yes, and for the first time in life I could take an international trip without having to justify myself or ask anyone for permission. But before traveling, I wanted to completely resolve the matter with Lily. 6 months after the meeting in the office, Henry called me for a conversation. "Robert, we have news about your case." "What news?" "Lily could not pay the $80,000 and is offering to return the house in exchange for forgiveness of the debt." I stayed silent for a long time. "Did she lose her job?" I asked finally. "She lost it. The firm discovered she used company resources for personal expenses, and the marriage with Chris ended after our investigation revealed the infidelity. She is living in a small rented apartment and surviving on sporadic jobs." I felt something strange. It was not joy for revenge nor sadness for my daughter's situation. It was a sense of closure, of a cycle completed. "And what do you think I should do, Henry?" "Legally, you can demand both the house and the money. It is your right. And humanly," Henry smiled, "humanly, you need to decide what kind of man you want to be from now on." I thought for a few days. I talked to friends from the club, each one giving a different opinion. Frank thought I should tighten the screws until she learned. John thought I should forgive to be able to continue in peace. In the end, I made a decision that surprised everyone. "Henry, I am going to accept only the house back. The money can stay." "Are you sure?" "I do not want anything else from Lily, nor do I owe her anything. We are even. Are you sure? I am sure. I want you to make an official document establishing that we have no further financial relationship or mutual obligation. As of today, I do not have a daughter, and she does not have a dad, legally and practically. Henry drafted the document. Lily signed without questioning, relieved not to have to pay the $80,000. Sometimes, after bridges are burned, they do not need to be rebuilt, even if you helped build them. I sold the house in the old neighborhood. I could no longer see it as home. It was just a property full of painful memories. With the money from the sale and my $1.5 million, I had complete financial freedom to rebuild my life as I wanted. I bought a smaller house in a nice community for mature people. My neighbors were other men and women between 60 and 80 who had chosen to live independently, but with a small support community. When a father is betrayed by his own blood, the scar crosses generations. But sometimes the scar becomes strength. I did not become bitter. That was my greatest victory. I could have become a resentful man talking obsessively about Lily's ingratitude to anyone who wanted to listen. Instead, I chose to use the experience as fuel for a better life. I created a small assistance fund for older men betrayed by family members. It was not ostentatious charity, but discreet help through Henry, to men who went through similar situations and had no resources. There are many dads being exploited by their own children, I told Helen, with whom I now had a serious and healthy relationship. If I can help some discover their value, my experience was not useless. Helen admired that capacity I had to transform pain into purpose. We had become true partners, two mature people who chose each other without neediness or dependencies, just for the mutual pleasure of being together. You became an impressive man, Robert, Helen said one afternoon when we visited a modern art exhibition. It must have been difficult to rebuild everything at 68. You know what I discovered, Helen? I replied. I did not rebuild anything. I built myself for the first time, because before I was just dad, just provider, just function. Now I am Robert, and Robert is an interesting man. It was true. At 69 years old, Robert Miller had become a version of himself that had never had the opportunity to exist. He was cultured. He had traveled to Italy and spoke decent Italian. He had his own opinions on art, politics, literature. He had true friends who respected him for who he was, not for what he could give. He had a partner who chose to be with him because she liked his company, not because she needed his resources. He had a routine that met his own interests, hobbies that fulfilled him, personal projects that gave him meaning. And for the first time in decades, I slept peacefully every night, knowing that the next day I would wake up to live my own life, not the life others expected me to live. 2 years after being kicked out of the house by my own daughter, I was sitting on the terrace of my house, drinking my morning coffee while reading a book about the Italian Renaissance. It was a September Saturday morning with that pleasant autumn sun that Chicago sometimes offers. Helen was by my side, reading a biography of Frida Kahlo. We had planned to visit an exhibition in the afternoon after lunch at an Italian restaurant we had discovered. It was a simple but full life. The phone rang. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. Hello. Dad. The voice on the other side was hesitant. Broken. Lily. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Helen looked at me with a question in her eyes. How did you get my number? I asked with a neutral voice. Dad, I asked Attorney Henry. I need to talk to you. We have nothing left to talk about, Lily. The document is signed. We have no further relationship. Dad, please listen to me just for a minute. I have cancer. I felt a tightness in my chest. Not of love. Paternal love had died definitely 2 years ago. It was basic human compassion. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. But that does not change our situation. Dad, I do not have anyone anymore. Chris married the other woman. His mom died last year, and I did not even know. I have no one to help me with the treatment. I thought of the Lily of 5 years ago who kicked me out of the house telling me I was dead weight. I thought of the $80,000 she stole from me over the years. I thought of the coldness with which she treated me when I ended up alone in the hospital. Lily, when I needed you, you told me it was not your problem. Now I apply the same logic. Dad, I was wrong. I recognize it. I was a horrible daughter. But I learned. I changed. You changed because you were left alone and without money, I said with a clarity that surprised me. If you had won the lottery instead of losing everything, you never would have called me. Dad, that is not true. Yes, it is, Lily. And you know how I know, because for 2 years you made no contact to know if I was alive or dead. You only called me now that you need help. There was a long silence on the other side. Dad, I beg you. Lily, I'm going to give you the same advice you gave me 2 years ago. Find somewhere to get treated. You do not have a dad anymore. I hung up the phone. Helen took my hand. Was it difficult? No, I replied with self-surprise. 2 years ago it would have been impossible. Today it was just necessary. I went back to reading my book, but the call made me reflect on everything that had happened since that December afternoon I was kicked out of the house. The great lesson I learned at 69 years old was simple but revolutionary. Paternal love cannot be unconditional when the child becomes an adult who chooses to be cruel. For 30 years I had confused paternal love with paternal submission. I thought being a good dad meant accepting any treatment, forgiving anything, giving everything without expecting anything. I discovered that was not love. It was self-erasure. You know what impresses me most about your story, Robert? Helen had asked me a few months before. It is how you managed to separate the dad you were, who was a wonderful dad, from the man you needed to be to protect yourself from a toxic daughter. It was true. I did not regret having been a dedicated father. I did not regret having raised Lily alone, having paid for her studies, having given everything for her during those years. That period of my life had been genuine and necessary. But I also did not regret having set limits when I discovered that love was being exploited and despised. Parenthood is not a lifetime contract of submission. How many dads walk around there financing their own humiliation? How many men are accepting crumbs from those who received a banquet of opportunities? I had discovered there is a fundamental difference between being a good dad and being a foolish dad. A good dad raises, educates, protects, and prepares the child for life. A foolish dad keeps doing that when the child is already an adult and chooses to be cruel. The most important thing I learned, I told the men at the club when a new member arrived telling a similar story, is that an ungrateful child is not a reflection of a bad dad. Sometimes an ungrateful child is just a child who chose to be ungrateful. For years I had carried the guilt, thinking if I were a better father, more present, more generous, Lily would treat me better. I discovered it had nothing to do with me. Lily had chosen to be a person who exploits those who love her. Period. And you know what else? I told Helen that morning after the call. She is going to find another person to exploit. They always find. And when she finds them, she is going to forget, I exist again until the next crisis. Helen admired how I had developed that clarity without bitterness. I did not stay ruminating on what Lily had done. I did not talk obsessively about her ingratitude. I had simply accepted she was a person I did not want in my life, and I had moved on. The same man who carried his daughter on his shoulders one day was left without a floor to stand on. But when he found firm ground again, he discovered he could build anything on top of it. I looked around my terrace, the plants I myself had chosen and cultivated, the books I bought because I wanted to read, the comfortable chair I chose thinking of my own comfort, the life I built thinking of my own tastes and needs. At 69 years old, I had learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when you are alone and feel incomplete. Solitude is when you are alone and feel whole. Helen, I said suddenly. Yes, thank you. What's for letting me be Robert? Not someone's dad, not someone's ex-husband, not someone's provider, just Robert. Helen smiled. Robert is a very interesting man. It was a pleasure meeting him. We went back to our reading calm in mutual company. At 70 years old, Robert Miller had finally learned that loving someone does not mean accepting being mistreated by that person. That being a dad does not mean being naive. That having dignity is not selfishness. And that never, but never, is it too late for a man to stand up again. If Robert's story touched your heart, I want to know where you're watching from. Right here in the comments, your city, your state, or even your country. Let me know this message reached you. And if you know a dad who is accepting less than he deserves, share this video, because there are many men who need to understand that valuing oneself is not selfishness. It is necessity. If this story made you reflect, leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. Also, write what you felt hearing this story. Tell me, have you had to set limits with your children? Do you know a dad who is being exploited by his own family? And if this story made you think, like and subscribe to the channel to keep watching real stories of men who chose their dignity. Because here we do not tell stories of victims. We tell stories of restarting. A hug from Chicago. And remember, you built much more than a family. You are a man who deserves respect. How many times do we men swallow lack of respect in the name of family peace? How many dads are financing their own humiliation? I learned at 70 years old that a man does not need to accept crumbs from those who received a banquet of opportunities. That being a dad does not mean being exploited, and that never, but never, is it too late for a man to stand up and discover his true value.